It's Wellness Wednesdays. It's Wellness Wednesday, and I had to take a bit of a wellness day yesterday. Well, didn't feel right doing Twitch yesterday because I'm having brain fog. It's a thing with the autoimmune condition I deal with, and I am just blanking on things out of nowhere. So I didn't feel up to live streaming, but with a video like this, I can stop and start as many times as I need to. This is not the first take on this video, but there you have it. I got 3 requests this week for Wellness Wednesday videos. This is one of them. I may do another one as a non-Wellness Wednesday video because I'm not sure it totally fits in Wellness Wednesday, but I think about it over the weekend. Anyway, Wellness Wednesday is supported primarily by Patreon dollars. It's the segments I get the most positive direct feedback about, people saying it's my favorite thing you do, and yet it tends to get the least amount of traffic in a given week. So help support this channel. Become a monthly patron, patreon.com/Leanna K. If I could just do Wellness Wednesday type content, I would be happy. It's very fulfilling. This week, one of the requests was how to deal with loss, especially how to deal with loss of someone who is a family member who understood you, who, you don't have a lot of family who get you, and this is somebody who gets you, and now they've passed. And I thought this was a good one because it would be easy enough to say, well, here's the thing on grief. But when you lose an especially close family member, yes, there's the grief component. But there's also this feeling like the world is less accepting of you now. And that's an extra layer of tough. I went through it when my maternal grandmother died. I went through it when my stepfather died. And part of the issue is that feeling of belonging less may interrupt the grieving process. It may happen at the same time and make it hit way harder. It may delay it and you're just sort of numb. And, one of the things the person said to me who asked me to do this topic is they felt, strange because they didn't feel the way they thought they were supposed to feel. And one of the things that people tell you but is hard to internalize is the concept that grief is not linear. It's true. I personally don't tend to feel grief right away, in part because in the case of the 2 relatives I lost, it wasn't, if somebody passes suddenly, it's shock. If someone passes after a long illness, there's a certain amount of relief that they're not suffering anymore. And then there's this whirlwind of funeral and this and that and the next thing, and other people acting stupid. Unfortunately, that is part of it. Some people grieve by acting out and they just splatter, their issues all over other stuff. The majority of people who watch this channel are introverts, so we don't tend to do that the same way. And so people may not see us grieving and see us feeling like we don't belong the same way. And then all of a sudden it'll hit us and people will be like, WTF, as if there's a right way to do this. And there isn't. And that's what makes this topic so challenging, because there are some warning signs. There's a difference between grief and depression. There's a difference between a temporary sense of feeling like you don't belong and a lingering sense that you don't belong. This sort of loss the acute stage is temporary, but the loss of the person is permanent. This is a permanent change in life. You're not going to forget that you lost this person. Every so often you'll think about it, and it'll hit you. What tends to happen over time is the sense of loss is replaced by a sense of gratitude, I suppose, that you had a person like this in your life at all. You'll remember sort of fondly funny stories or little affectations. Um, you remember about them. Both relatives of mine ended up being boss fight characters infused in a boss fight character. I didn't even realize I was doing it at the time, but afterwards I went back and said, yeah, that was his mannerism. That was sort of her affectation. Um, and it you eventually do come to a sense of comfort for knowing them. Now that takes time. And this is where we get into the stupidity of the false strength that the world tries to force us to conform to. Trying not to feel is not strength. Showing emotions is not weakness. True strength, true fortitude is being able to name and sort your emotions and process them. This may mean crying. This may mean smashing things that is okay to be smashed. Don't smash other people's things. I used to do that. I don't find, the whole catharsis thing works for me the same way anymore. I've become very much an internal processor. Just sort of take the time, work through it. The music in RimWorld helps a lot. That there is no more chill music on the planet than the music in RimWorld. But you gotta process those feelings. You have to face your feelings, name the feelings, and then assign the feelings a healthy place in your life. And naming a feeling does not necessarily mean giving it a standard name. If it's sort of this or sort of that, as long as you can recognize what that feeling is and put it in its place, it doesn't matter what you call it. And you're gonna feel cycles of a lot, sadness, some moments of despair, anger, a lot of stuff. Then you'll have like a happy memory, and then it'll feel bad again, then feel happy. It'll be all over the place. And if you're anything like me, you're constantly busy, so you won't have time to stop at the moment. You'll get a break a few months from now and it'll hit you then. I wish I could take breaks when these things happen, but with the nature of what I do, that's not necessarily an option. So I deal with it the way I deal with it. This is one of those things where the uniqueness of, as I said, the grieving process makes it difficult to provide a roadmap. And with people in this particular situation where they don't have necessarily the support system some other people do, and that's why this particular loss stings so bad, it makes it harder to get that real life support that tends to be really important with this. The other thing about being an introverted personality is that we don't seek interpersonal support the same way. We may not want to talk about it. We may just want to be with someone, right? Just as an example. The other thing about the particular gamer kind of nerd audience is the fact that there's some social awkwardness or some, neuroatypicality going on here. And so in moments like this, there are unfortunately a lot of really shitty judgments that people label on people because they're grieving and you're not grieving in a way that's acceptable to them. Therefore, they make comments that really sting. And that makes it harder. All I can say to help get through that is it's okay to think they're an asshole because they're being an asshole when they do that. They may not mean to. They may think they're helping, but they're not. And unfortunately, a lot of people who gamers, they're sort of the person, the shit catcher at the bottom of the hill, the whole phrase, the shit rolls downhill. Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of gamers, I talk to people and there seems to be a common theme that they're sort of the one that doesn't fight back in their family. And so they get dumped on, they get criticized, stuff like that. That will get temporarily worse because other people are sad. And so those bad behaviors amplify in people like that, because the reason people like that do things like that is because they don't know how to process emotions. So they displace their self-criticism on other people. And introverts tend to be easy targets because we tend to not respond. I have had to learn how to respond actively to stuff like that because being the person at the bottom of the shit hill was having a really negative effect on me. So the best general advice I can give is this is the time to practice that self-compassion. This is that time to really level set on any accomplishment you get in a day, anything you achieve that feels hard. It doesn't have to objectively be hard. It just has to feel hard. Some days getting out of bed is hard. Me recording videos like this when I've got brain fog is hard, right? You do it. It's not going to be perfect. That's something I wish the world in general was better at. Being more fair to people when they're not at their best, but they're going out there and they're doing it anyway. I think there's a real deficit in compassion with that. It's always been there, but especially in this age of like Instagram filters on everything, people don't know what the human condition is in a lot of ways anymore. They demand this perfection that just isn't there. And I'm really fortunate to have some people who are, really top of their game, singers and performers and, artists and stuff like that. And you'll never meet anyone more forgiving of not your best days or not your best work than somebody who excels at their craft. It's really interesting that way that, people who are, I hate to use the term wannabes, but people who haven't had that same level of success, they're super self-critical. And so they're other critical as well. And, they pick on everything. Whereas most of the people who are really frigging amazing at what they do, they're like, sometimes it just doesn't go your way. Like sometimes that shape just doesn't form. Sometimes the note just doesn't come out. Sometimes you just bomb in a comedy routine. It happens. It happens to everybody. And that's true of life as well. You know, not every presentation, not every social interaction, not everything you do is going to be great or even good. Most of the time, it's just okay. And, you know, then you get a second draft or you get something. It's like, okay, that part didn't work, but that part did. So we're going to take this and move it on. And that's especially important to remember when you're hurting, when you're feeling difficult and draining emotions. The other thing to keep in mind is that you can't have light without darkness. You can't have triumph without adversity. You can't have good without the bad in life. Because if you didn't have the bad in life, you'd have nothing to compare the good to. So as you come out of this process, you'll learn an important life lesson, which is that these sorts of bad feelings, the acute stage is temporary. And wisdom is never easily learned. You can study for a test. You can study for knowledge, right? You can study, for facts, for intelligence. Wisdom, though, wisdom is only gained through life. There are no study guides for some of this stuff. Going through it and getting through it gives you that wisdom. And I mean, shit, that's where these segments come from. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a social worker. I didn't go to school for this stuff. I am just somebody who has been through a lot of shit in my life and was able to turn it into something that seems to help other people. And the cool thing about wisdom is as you gain it, being the smartest person in the room is less important. That's sort of the cool thing about having more life experience is you don't need that 18 intelligence score. If you've got like a 15 in wisdom, you can be a totally different character kit. Some people never pick up that wisdom because they don't face the challenges life throws at them. And that's why it's very, very important to face stuff. Now, what does facing stuff mean? It means feel what you're feeling. Admit it hurts. Admit it's sad. Let yourself feel. It is nuts that we have to tell people now, let yourself feel, because so much of the world is do it on your own time. Well, you can't set an oven timer for emotions sometimes, right? That's ridiculous. I think that's part of the reason that Frozen was so huge is the lyrics of that song, or don't let them in, don't let them see, be the good girl you always have to be, conceal, don't feel, don't let them know. I think a lot of people connected to that. And people got very sick of that song, but I think that's part of the reason it was so massive. Kids who like it just think it's a pretty song and it's a Disney princess, but adults are like, yeah, okay, there's some truth there. And I think a lot of people, and this is if for history nerds out there, this is a fairly recent thing in human history. If you read Greek epics, or you read even The Lord of the Rings, which is based on Greek epics, socialization, especially for men, was very, very different back then. It was considered not just appropriate to show grief, cry, scream, wail when you lose someone. It there was sort of a social stigma if you didn't, and I don't think that's necessarily good either. But you read the Odyssey or you read the Lord of the Rings, they're crying all over the place, right? It's only been since the World Wars that this keep it all in, don't show it, among certain cultures has come about. Uh, there are exceptions. And fortunately, I think we're starting to get better about it again. This is where we get into hegemonic cultures and stuff like that. And I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. But, I growing up around other cultures, you see other ways of dealing with things, and that is very useful. Doesn't necessarily solve the pain. And I use solve the pain consciously because we're problem solvers, a lot of us intellectual introverts. And so solve for X is our lifeline. And unfortunately, when you're dealing with grief, it's a whole alphabet soup of variables. There are too many to neatly solve the equation. And that can be very scary. Being told it's normal doesn't help because you're not normal. So normal doesn't help you. It is healthy to be okay with being temporarily overwhelmed because those variables you will get data to put in those placeholders with time. You will figure out what to do with those emotions. And some people say, oh, this time, this amount of time, beyond that, it's a problem. For trauma, yes. For feeling overwhelming despair, yes. But grief doesn't have a time limit on it. I know some people who were okay after 6 months. By okay, I mean functional. I know some people who needed 3, 4, 5 years and they came through it and they eventually were happy again and moved on with their lives. They just needed more time for a bunch of reasons. Sometimes there's a real domino effect because there are, it's one thing if you don't live with the person. It's one thing if you're not financially reliant on the person. Whether or not you're dealing with probate, wills, that process sucks. Let me tell you, that settling estates, miserable at a time that's already sad, god awful, hate it. And unfortunately, that's where a lot of family stuff rears its head and people start fighting about stuff that isn't what they're really fighting about. And it's a mess. It is totally okay to want to walk away from that. You may only be able to get away from it temporarily, but it's okay to walk away when things like that get too intense. It's the right thing to do. And do things that make you happy, do things that make you feel good. If temporarily you don't want to do certain things because you're not feeling good and you don't want to associate those things with bad feelings, that's okay too. As long as a lack of interest in things you used to enjoy doesn't last, too long, it's okay to not want to build that association. typical things, diet, exercise. It's tough right now because it's winter. I've been making myself exercise and it has been not as easy. Personally, I find physical tasks. So instead of working out when I'm feeling sad, when I'm feeling down, things like, tackling the boxes of stuff in the basement, or going through and reorganizing my costume stuff, or even going through old makeup and throwing out the stuff that's gone off. It needs to get done, and it doesn't require the same focus as brain work. I find that can be very therapeutic when you're feeling fuzzy because you're grieving. And you can do it on your own, or you can do it with somebody else. It's whatever you're feeling that day, right? So hopefully that stuff helps. The last thing I'll say is, it's a particular struggle for introverts to allow other people to be there for you. And that's because your tendency is to figure out what's going on and then present it to the group, right? You're not a venter, you're not a bounce ideas off people person that way. It's okay to talk about it before you've got it all figured out. If you've got a piece of it you're figuring out, or even what you're looking to figure out, people that care about you want to hear that. And, excuse me, some people can't handle it. Don't try with those people. But if you've got somebody in your life that, can handle it, awesome. Talk to them. This is why I want to do Leanna Care Service, because some people don't have anybody. If you don't have anybody, sometimes writing it down, or, opening up Audacity, or using your phone recorder and just talking and recording it can help. Just saying it out loud instead of it rattling around in your head. I have no idea why that's a different processing mode, but it is. It just makes it somewhat less abstract to have to use words. So try that. I'm interested in your feedback on this. I'm interested in your comments. Address them on Feedback Friday. There's going to be a lot of comments from yesterday's video for Feedback Friday that are good. So it's going to be a chock-a-block Feedback Friday, but be good to yourself. You've got a whole community of people who, have you in their thoughts, even though they don't know who you are. They give a shit about you because you're a person, you're a part of this community. So hopefully that helps. And this is where I'm supposed to go to Patreon. It feels like such an awkward segue, but I'll do it. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron. Patreon.com/LeannaK. Your support for this channel provides support for other people. Thanks for watching.